Work for?
Corona Police Department.
And how long have you worked for the Corona Police Department?
Approximately 26 years.
Were you working there on September the 18th, 2015?
Yes, sir.
What was your assignment that day?
I was assigned to the General Property section of the Detective Bureau.
Were you asked at some point that day to respond to the location at 858 Derby?
Yes, sir.
And did you respond to that location?
Yes, sir.
What was the assignment that you were given while you were there?
Detective Bloomfield wanted me to photograph the exterior and interior of the residence and collect any evidence that was at the scene.
And Detective Bloomfield at the time was one of the homicide inspectors?
Yes, sir.
Now, let me show you an exhibit which has been marked 117 for identification. Do you recognize that?
Yes, sir.
What are we looking at there?
That's the master bedroom, and that's the green and yellow Anaheim Angels hat that I found in that bedroom.
And you called it an Anaheim Angels hat?
Yes.
Somebody else earlier on called it an Oakland A's hat?
Right, but I thought there was a halo around it, so.
The colors of Oakland are green and gold?
Correct.
Right. And Anaheim normally is associated with a red hat?
Correct.
But they have some retro hats which look like A's hats?
That's correct.
Okay. And we know this was an Angels because of the halo?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And that was in the master bedroom?
Yes, sir.
Of the house at 858?
Yes, it was.
And the homeowner, a nice Korean lady, allowed you in?
Yes, sir.
Looking at the window there where the blind is up, did you notice that location?
Yes, sir.
And was there a screen on that window?
No, it was already off.
And where was that screen found?
It was found in the grass area on the southeast side of the house.
Was that the only window where a screen had been pushed out?
No, sir.
What was the other location if there was one?
There was another bedroom on the south side of the house where the screen had been pushed out.
If you were to look out that window where the screen was, what would you see below?
It fell on top of, they had a lattice patio cover, and it fell on top of that.
Let me show you what's been marked as 116 for identification. And you see that there?
Yes, sir.
What we're looking at there?
So that's it was the Ford F-350 key and 33 cents I found right there that was in the back patio area.
And where did that evidence come from?
I was told it came from the suspect.
Cross.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Photo that we just saw of the interior of the master bedroom. You took that photo?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah.
This is People's 117. You took that photo?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. And your job, among others, was to take photos of the interior and exterior of the house?
Yes, sir.
That's correct. Did you also take a photo of the outside wall where that window was?
I don't remember. If I did, it was all on the CD that I had logged into evidence.
One of your other tasks was to take some measurements at the scene. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Did you measure the distance from that window down to the ground?
No, the distance I measured was from the gate to where the canine first engaged the suspect, and after the suspect dragged the canine, I measured the distance from when that first happened to where they ended up.
You made measurements that were on the ground only?
Yes, sir.
The window that we're looking at is on the second story, correct?
That's correct.
You were there. Did you have an opportunity to look out the window down to the ground?
Yes.
Estimate the distance for us?
8 feet.
8 feet?
Yeah, approximately.
Again, that's on the second story, correct?
The second story.
Outside of that window, is it just straight down to the ground?
Yes, just a grass area.
There's not a garage or anything that's below there?
No.
you locate any other property of note inside the house?
No, sir. The hat was the only thing I found.
And you did a search of the home to locate anything else?
Yes, sir.
And what were you looking for?
Any evidence that did not belong to the parks that could have potentially belonged to the suspect?
You did not find any weapons in the house, correct?
No, sir.
The only item that did not belong to the parks that you located was that baseball cap?
Inside the house, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Redirect, Mr. Kurz.
Yeah, very briefly, just one question. You mentioned to defense counsel that you took a measurement from the position where the canine contacted the suspect and to the end of when the suspect struggled with the canine. What was that distance?
From the time the canine contacted the suspect had drugged the canine 29 feet, and that's when he was taken into custody.
Recross.
No questions.
Witness excused or subject to recall?
Excuse.
You're excused. Thank you, sir. Next witness.
Officer Marquez. I do. Thank you, sir.
Please state, spell your first and your last name for the record.
Sorry about that. Detective Jesse Marquez, Jesse Marquez.
Thank you. You may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Officer Marquez.
Morning. Afternoon, sorry.
Don't confuse me.
No, sir.
Okay. Who do you work for?
Corona Police Department.
And how long have you worked for the Corona Police Department?
About 20 years.
Were you working for the Corona Police Department back on September the 18th, 2015?
I was.
And what was your assignment at that time?
At that time, I was assigned to the Post Accountability and Compliance Team, short for PAC. It's a multi-agency task force that works throughout the city of County Riverside, monitoring post-release probationers and parolees, things like that.
Okay, so parolees and probationers?
Anybody on supervised release, yes, sir.
And you said that is an interagency assignment?
Yes.
Working with parole, probation, district attorney, people of that nature?
Correct.
At some point, did you become aware of an incident that happened the previous night, September 17th, 2015, at address on Winthrop in the city of Corona?
I was.
How did you become aware of that?
It was basically through patrol information, just a briefing type distribution of like information fire.
And the city of Corona Police Department will give its officers briefing on certain crimes happening within the city.
Correct.
And the information regarding the address on Winthrop was the triple homicide there, or possible triple homicide there on September 17, 2015.
Correct.
At that time, were you given a suspect information as well?
I was.
Was that suspect Brandon Martin?
It was.
And were you given a vehicle description of a vehicle to be on the lookout for?
Yes.
And was that a Raptor?
Correct, a white one.
I'm sorry?
They believe it was white?
Yep, a white Raptor. And then, from your point of view, did you become involved in the apprehension of that suspect, Brandon Martin, at 858 Derby?
I was.
And how did you become involved in that apprehension?
I was at the station and I was called by my partner, Officer Behenis at the time, who had called me and advised me he had just located the vehicle and what area he was in. I immediately responded to that area.
So Officer Behenis, we've already heard testify this afternoon, that he was your partner officer in this task force?
Yes, he was.
And I understand he was on his way to work when he became involved in this pursuit and apprehension.
Correct.
So when you received information from Behenas, what did you do?
I immediately got in my patrol vehicle, which is equipped with breaching equipment. Because of the task force and the duties we have a bunch of breaching equipment in the vehicle. And I started heading southbound towards the area of Lincoln and Mountain Gate, which was the last area I'd heard they were in, but obviously it moved before I got there.
What do you mean by breaching?
Breaching equipment in my vehicle sometimes, like for layman's terms, almost like the battering ram or a pick that's sometimes used to get into a residence or a door if we have to force the door open.
And at that time when you left the station, had you received information that there might be a suspect inside a residence?
I hadn't received, on the way to the call, I had received information that he might have been inside the residence.
And when you got to the residence, what did you do?
I immediately started to bring out my breaching equipment because they were requesting breaching equipment to potentially have to get into the residence.
Did you have to employ that equipment?
I didn't have to, no.
At some point, did you become aware that the suspect, Brandon Martin, had been seen in the backyard at 858 Derby?
Correct.
Were you part of the team that went from the front of Derby to the backyard?
I was.
You were with Behenas, is that correct?
Yes.
Corporal Bennett, the K9 handler?
Yes.
To your memory, how many officers went in single file from the backyard to the front yard?
To my memory, it must have been maybe 4 or 5 of us. I couldn't give you everybody by name, but I know us 3 for sure, and then I wasn't sure who else was with us.
When you entered, can you remember where in line you were? Whether you were the lead officer, second, third, fourth? I wasn't the lead officer. I might have been like the 3rd or 4th back. Okay. And when you got there, tell us what you saw. Bennett is in front of you.
Yes.
Okay. And you may even have been like the 4th officer back.
Yes.
When you get to the backyard area, what are you able to see when you get there?
I'm able to flank around to Bennett's left side, and I can see a male subject laying on the floor below a 2nd-story window. Okay. He was laying on the floor.
Was his back to you?
I can't recall if his back was to us, but I know he was laying flat on the ground, and he was being given directions to comply.
Okay. Who was given those directions?
Corporal Bennett.
Corporal Bennett. And the practice would be for Corporal Bennett, being a K9 handler, to give the instructions so the dog doesn't become confused by many different commands.
Correct.
And when Corporal Bennett gave the instructions, was there any compliance?
No, there was not.
Did Corporal Bennett at some point release the dog to approach the suspect?
He did.
What did you see happen when Bennett released the dog to the suspect?
I saw the dog bite the suspect, Brandon Martin, on the arm, at which time Brandon Martin proceeded to strike the dog several times on the face and on the muzzle on top of his head. At one point, it looks like he had wrapped his hand around the muzzle of the dog, and then he proceeded to slam the dog to the ground, and landing on top of the dog, causing the dog to yelp and cry out, I'm assuming from pain.
And from where you were, you're flanking Bennett on his left side?
Yes, sir.
And Behenas is there with you as well?
Correct.
And do you remember who the lead officer was?
But when we started making advancements, I would know Bennett, myself, and Behenas kind of all approached together.
Okay. And when you saw Brandon Martin slam the dog to the ground and landing his weight on top of the dog, you said the dog let out a yelp?
Yes, like a yelp of pain.
Okay. At that point, what did the police officers do in terms of their next action?
Well, I can't speak for what they did, but obviously what I did is I noticed that the dog was being, it wasn't doing the desired effect. It wasn't getting him to comply. It wasn't affecting the apprehension. So at which time I deployed my own RCB, rapid containment baton, what we call our baton. art's expandable, and started to attempt to get my own compliance.
And from your point of view, when you enter a situation like that, your main goal is to get compliance.
Correct.
And as soon as you get compliance, then the suspect is going to be placed in handcuffs and detained.
Correct.
We know that you had information before that this was a suspect wanted in a possible triple homicide, and that what you knew at the time, you didn't know if he was armed or what the situation could be.
Absolutely.
You know, of course, he had fled from officers in the city of Corona prior to that.
Absolutely. Yes, correct.
And by the time he got into the backyard, you had information that he'd entered into at least one home of a citizen of Corona.
Correct. And that I heard on the radio that he had jumped out of that same residence. That's kind of where I located him after he had jumped out of the second story window.
Okay. And now, in terms of the non-compliance, where were the hands of the suspect, Brandon Martin?
Well, his right hand was still had the dog on him. However, his left hand went into his lower waistband. He fell onto his stomach, and his left hand had gone down into his waistband, and he wouldn't comply by bringing his left hand out of his waistband.
Now, when you said you retrieved your baton,
yes, sir.
Were you on top of the suspect at that time?
I guess I was standing almost above him,
Okay.
but I wasn't physically on top of him.
Okay. And he was prone on the ground, on his stomach, hands concealed.
Well, the right hand was being bit by the dog, but the left hand was tucked under his waistband area.
And did you attempt to get control of that left hand?
Yes, somebody was on his arm, trying to get his arm out from there, and I was trying to get compliance by delivering one baton strike to his right thigh. The baton strike didn't have any effect with his compliance, so I delivered a second one, and that one also didn't have compliance. So figuring that obviously the next one's probably going to have the same effect, I moved my target location and ended up delivering a third strike to his calf area. That's the use of the baton at that point.
And while you were delivering these strikes to the legs of the suspect, Brandon Martin, was he kicking out at the officers?
He was flailing and kicking. It was really hard for us to get control and actually get a good grip on his arm or his legs.
After that third strike, did that have an impact in your ability to control the lower part of the suspect?
Correct. After I delivered the third strike, I saw an opportunity to sweep onto his legs, so I abandoned the baton and immediately wrapped up both his legs together and crisscrossed them together, and then folded them in half and was able to put my weight on him to keep him from kicking.
Is that a particular application that you're trying to do?
Correct.
Or what is that application?
That's called the TARP restraint system, total appendage restraint procedure. Total appendage restraint procedure.
Okay. And that's something that you're trained to as a police officer to detain somebody who's non-compliant with your orders?
Correct. I'm an instructor in that.
Oh, okay. You do that instruction?
I do.
You instruct at just the Corona Police Department, or do you instruct elsewhere?
At the Corona Police Department, I'm a defensive tactic instructor.
Okay. So you were able to, teachers don't only teach, they also do.
Correct. Right.
So you were able to employ that TARP application and control the lower part of the legs.
Correct.
Once those legs were under control, was it easier then to control the hands of the suspect?
Absolutely.
Were you the one who applied the handcuffs?
I assisted with the application of the handcuffs, but the officers that were trying to wrangle his arm from underneath him were the ones that ultimately applied the handcuffs.
Okay. So you said how many officers were there? Like 2, 3, 4?
I think at that point there was probably about four of them there.
And so while you're employing the TARP application, controlling the lower half of the body, that allows other officers to control the hands and then to apply the handcuffs.
Correct.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross?
No question.
Witness excused or subject to recall?
Excuse.
You're excused. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Next witness?
Yes, people call Nathaniel Devlin.
home was his if the evidence you should. There's a home. Still have the gun?
I do. Thank you.
State, spell your first and your last name for the record.
First name is Nathan, Nathan. Last is Devlin, Devlin.
May I inquire?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Devlin.
Hello?
Who do you work for?
The Corona Police Department
And when did you start working with the Corona Police Department?
in 2003.
In 2015, September the 17th, 2015 to be precise, were you working as a CSI technician?
I was, yes.
Basically crime scene collection of evidence?
Correct.
And on that time, were you working under direct supervision of Sergeant Brad Voorhees?
I was.
Did you go to that address, 1027 Winthrop in the city of Corona?
Yes, sir.
And while you were there, were you involved in collection of evidence?
I was.
When you were there, did you collect a black baseball bat?
I did.
If I could show you what's been marked as People's 226, do you recognize that black baseball bat?
Yes, sir.
Does that appear to be the bat that you retrieved from the Winthrop address?
It does.
When you collected that bat, was that the only bat that you saw in the house?
It was not.
Were there other bats in the house?
Yes, sir.
Can you remember how many?
I don't recall.
But you remember other bats being in the house?
Yes.
Did you collect any other bats other than that black baseball bat?
I did not.
Was that black baseball bat the only bat that you saw that was black in color?
I don't recall.
Okay. But of all the bats you saw, this was the only one that you retrieved?
Correct.
Okay. And what was the appearance of the bat when you collected it?
The bat was leaning against the wall in a corner behind the door leading from like a hallway area to the garage. It had dents in it, and it had what appeared to be blood on it.
Okay. And when you collected that, how did you store that bat?
I recall putting it in a box to suspend it from both ends so that where we saw the majority of what we believed to be blood and damage wasn't touching the packaging.
Okay. And did you at some point take that bat to the Department of Justice?
I did.
Okay. Thank you. Now, were you also involved in processing the a Ford Raptor?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I have a few questions I want to ask you about that now. Showing you what's been marked as People's 165. You recognize that?
Yes, sir.
And is that the Ford Raptor 2012 Ford Raptor that you processed?
It is.
Okay. I'm showing you what's been marked as 172. And if we could zoom in. Need help? In on the license. You see the ADT employee badge for Barry Swanson?
Yes, sir.
And did you find that in the Ford Raptor?
Correct, in the center console under the armrest.
Okay. And were you the one who took that photograph?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then also inside that vehicle, let me show you what's been marked as 169 for identification. You see what we're looking at there?
Yes, sir.
Did you find that inside the vehicle?
I believe so.
And does that appear to be a California driver's license for the name of Brandon Willie Martin?
Yes.
Okay. And showing you 171 for identification. If you zoom out a tad on that one, looking at those placards, they're on the passenger side of the front passenger side of the Raptor.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Were you able to collect an iPhone from that location?
Yes.
And then an iPhone phone case?
Correct.
And those would have been items 22 and 23?
Yes.
Then also inside the Raptor in the driver's side compartment area, I'm going to show you 167. You see that item there?
Yes.
Did you take that photograph?
I did.
Okay. And do you recognize taking that photograph?
Yes.
I have a close-up of that, and I'll show you again. This is 168 for identification. And the paper that we saw that was in on the driver's side in the little compartment area next to the driver's seat, that was something from Carl's Jr.?
Correct.
Okay. Now, did you also attend the autopsy of Michael Martin?
I did.
And that was on September 21st, 2015?
I believe so.
Okay. When you were at the autopsy, did you collect evidence from that autopsy and transfer it to the Department of Justice?
I did.
Okay. Let me show you 215 for identification. You see that packaging there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And on that packaging, that refers to item evidence number ND44.
Correct.
ND would be Nathaniel Devlin.
Yes.
And 44 would just be the sequential number of the items collected.
Correct.
Okay. What was the item collected from the autopsy on Michael Martin's autopsy?
Item ND44 was pieces of the skull from Michael Martin with what appeared to be black paint transfer on them.
And let me show you 204 for identification. And are those the pieces of the skull that you packaged in that packaging we just saw and later transferred to the Department of Justice?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Ross? No question. Is the witness excused or subject to recall?
Excused. That's fine.
You're excused. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And that's our last witness of the day, Mr. Kearse.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and recess. We're going to start a little bit later tomorrow. We're going to start at 10 o'clock tomorrow, so just a little bit later. But I'll remind all of you not to discuss the facts of this case amongst yourselves or with anyone unrelated to the trial, not form or express any opinion until you've heard all the evidence.